Hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Yuki. I'm a program director here at VIA, and I've had the honor of working with our Global Community Fellowship program for the last 4 years. It's a program with a really long legacy, all the way back to our founding in 1963. I'm also honored to serve as the moderator for today's roundtable discussion, which is going to be led by three of our alumni. Annie, Lynn, you could give us a little wave. Annie, Lynn, Brianna Avila, and then Lulu Zhou. They're going to introduce themselves in just a moment. I wanted to start our session today with a bit of an origin story behind this session and explain why we're gathering today. So Annie, one of our speakers, first raised the possibility of hosting today's event back in July. We were having a really casual conversation about how international fellowships like GCF, Peace Corps, Fulbright, Princeton in Asia, etc. These are really different for students from low income and first generation backgrounds. So we need to be proactive and discuss the challenges that low income and first gen students face, and also discuss the strengths that they bring to these kinds of roles. So today's session is focused on the experiences of first generation folks, meaning people who are the first generation in their family to graduate from high school or college, as well as folks who are low income, meaning that they may have needed financial support for things like tuition, housing, and food. But I think that a lot of what we'll discuss today will apply to folks from all kinds of marginalized backgrounds. So maybe you're undocumented or native, you're a child of immigrants or LGBT or a refugee. There are so many reasons why we might not be aware of opportunities, or why we might preemptively count ourselves out and say, you know what, that's not for me. So I'm really glad that Annie suggested hosting this session and brought us all together today. So a little bit about how we're going to structure our time together today. We want this to be an interactive conversation, which I know can be difficult over Zoom. So our session is designed as a round table discussion. I want you to imagine that we are all sitting around a giant table together. And our speakers are going to take the lead with the conversation, but we hope that you'll also join the discussion. So after our speakers introduce themselves, our time together will be split into 3 parts. So first, talking about the application phase. Second, we're going to talk about what the actual fellowship was like once they were accepted. And then third, what is life like after the fellowship as an alum? So for each of the 15-minute sections, our alumni speakers will kick off the discussion. And then after about 10 minutes, we'll welcome 1 or 2 folks from the audience to share their questions or comments by typing into the chat or coming off of mute. So you can post your questions, your comments at any time while our speakers are chatting. And then towards that 10-minute mark, I or one of the speakers will address 1 or 2 of the chat comments towards the end. Okay, that was a lot of talking. Are there any questions about the structure, the format of our roundtable discussion today? Any questions? Okay, so we're going to do a quick test to make sure that your fingers work, to make sure that your chat works. Okay, so we would love to hear, what country/city are you in right now? So you can write into the chat for us. And while you do that, I'm going to pin our speakers. Ooh, Fort Collins, Washington, Chiang Mai, love it. Minnesota, Bali, Palo Alto, Redwood City, Chiba. Nice. Very nice. All right. So without further ado, we're going to get this conversation started. And first, I'm going to have our speakers introduce themselves. And I prepared 4 questions for them, which I'll throw into the chat. So first, how do you identify with the labels low income and first gen? When and where was your VIA post? Where are you now? What are you up to post-fellowship? And fourth, if you've done anything similar to GCF, like study abroad, fellowships, or international experiences, we'd love for you to share. So I will start with Annie.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining and thank you Yuki for all your support when I first came to you with this idea. So I identify as both first gen and low income. So I'm first gen high school graduate and also university. My parents, their highest level of education was the ninth grade. And I know the term low income is like kind of relative, but for me, growing up, programs like WIC, I'm a TRIO alum, Medicaid, all of those shaped a lot of my experiences and honestly has helped me get to where I am today. And then in terms of my post, I was based in Chiang Mai, Thailand, working as an academic advisor for Parma University from 2023 and just to this year, 2025. And currently, I just started a master's in international educational development at the University of Pennsylvania. And then in terms of anything any other international experiences. I didn't do study abroad, and I haven't done any other fellowships, but something I'm working on is also like valuing other like non-formal international experiences. And so, just for full transparency, I'm what early childhood scholars call a satellite child, basically born in the States, but then spent my early years in China before coming back when I was ready for school. So that's a little bit about me, and I'll pass it over to Brianna.
Thanks for sharing, Annie. So my name is Brianna Avila. I'm from Salinas, California. I was born to really young parents, so they were 17 when my oldest brother was born, and so they were unable to continue their high school education. So because they were so young, they also were financially needed a little bit of support with government assistance. So we utilized programs like Section 8 housing, WIC as well. In food banks and things like that. Um, I'm also the first in my family to go on to get an associate's degree. So I went to community college first, got an associate's degree for transfer, and then went on to university and was the first to get a university degree. I was a VIA fellow last year. So I was based in Chiang Mai, Thailand. I worked for Beam Education Foundation. And I'm currently still in Thailand at 7 a.m. here. And I'm in between jobs at the moment, kind of just traveling around. Yeah. Lulu, want to go ahead?
Thank you. And hi everyone, my name is Lulu Zhou and currently based in New York City. So I actually immigrated to New York City when I was 10 from China. Both of my parents didn't even finish middle school back in rural China in the South. And when I first came here, it was like 2007. Like I didn't know any English. I wasn't struggling in English learner classes for 4 years. And then when I started high school, that was when I realized really needed to work hard because my immigrant parents have sacrificed so much. Then in college, I went to Middlebury College, which has a lot of international focus. And in my junior year, I spent my semester in China. And that was basically not my original, quote unquote, original pathway because originally I thought I would just graduate, stay in the US, work in the US, be a teacher. And then when I was studying in China, I really felt like I think there were a lot of like grappling with identity, but also intellectually and professionally, I just realized that Asia was like super interesting to me, and that was when I got inspired to like apply to these international fellowships, including VIA. And similar to Brianna, I was actually a fellow at Beam Education Foundation from 2019 to 2020. So I was basically the COVID cohort, and it all ended in March 2020. And so my journey has kind of been like a turmoil because after the VF fellowship, I actually moved to China in spring 2020, where like life became normal. And over there, I did like early childhood development research and intervention. And then after 2 years in Asia, I came back to the US where I did like research and evaluation. And then 2 years later, I went to grad school for a Master of Public Administration at NYU, which I just graduated this May. And so currently, I'm basically doing another new job. And now I'm working in education consulting, which is basically working with like school districts, foundations, and so on in the US. So now I'm back here focusing on like domestic education equity. And thank you for being here today. I'll pass it back to Yuki.
Thank you so much, all three of you, for sharing your backgrounds. And, I think today we're going to talk about things that maybe are a little bit vulnerable too. So I want to thank you for that as well. So we're going to enter our first section, our first phase, which is talking about the application phase, right? When you're writing your application essays and asking for recommenders and all of that stuff, it can be very intimidating. We're going to start our 15-minute timer. Keep us on track because I like to talk. So I'm going to start that. And then, Annie, I'm going to start with you. And let me put the question into the chat as well. So, what internal and external challenges did you face as a first-gen low-income student applying for fellowships? And what impacted your decision-making process to apply or not? So, Annie, I'll start with you, but then Lulu and Brianna, you can go crazy.
Yeah, I think there were just thinking back, there were just a ton of like particularly internal challenges as well as external challenges. The first being I struggled a lot in probably all 4 years of undergrad with imposter syndrome and just feeling like, I don't know, everyone was miles ahead. Everyone was just so well traveled. And basically, I made the decision in undergrad, like, it just wasn't feasible to study abroad, even though there were scholarships, because I was like, the opportunity cost, right? If I study abroad, I can't work. And so yeah, I worked all through undergrad. So I was like, I don't have any like formal international experience. And so like that will disqualify me and like I won't be as qualified and just I really just completely discarded any of my like non-formal international experience and just um yeah, did not take that into account. And then at the same time, like a lot of my friends, were finding jobs in DC and I was like it felt at the time maybe a fellowship wasn't like a real job, and I just felt a lot of internal pressure of like, like my parents, have sacrificed a lot, and so like I need to find a job that, is well paying, and so a lot of that internal pressure, and then externally, I had some student loans, and so like just stressing out about that, about what would happen with that. Again, thinking back, like opportunity costs, like, I'm like, if I do a fellowship, like I'm living off of a stipend, which is like obviously like lower than, perhaps the salary I would make in the US. And so, yeah, those were just some of like the challenges that were floating in my head. And ultimately, I think what cemented my decision to apply was talking to people and mentors and like professors who like really provided encouragement, as well as talking to a lot of other first gen students. There was a good network of first gen students at my university, which I was like very plugged into. Um, and then I think something that I've held on to is um, is just thinking about like my parents' journey. So the way I thought I conceptualized it was my parents, like their entire lives, they've worked in Chinese restaurants. Like the four walls of a Chinese restaurant is all they've really known. And so at their age, at that time, I was what, 22, right? Like at that time, they didn't have the privilege of being able to dream. And yes, like I also was facing barriers, but I have this privilege, this moment, in this moment, graduating this privilege to dream. And so I was like, I need to take advantage of that, take advantage of that privilege of being able to dream. And ultimately, like being able to conceptualize that is ultimately like what pushed me to apply. I'll pass it over to either Lulu or Brianna.
I think what you're saying about like not studying abroad, that was something that was important to me as well. I really wanted to study abroad in university, but I also financially didn't see it as a viable option moving forward. And also kind of coming from community college, I knew early on when I was 18 starting college that I did want to study abroad, and that was something that, I wanted to go internationally. But the kind of conversation with academic advisors at the time was really, well, you should focus on transferring to university. That should be your first step, which made sense to me as well. I didn't really know how to go to university. I didn't really know the differences of schools and universities and things. But it wasn't really a conversation until the later half, when I was a junior and senior, even that was possible studying abroad. And then at the time, COVID and financially, it didn't really seem to make sense. And so I kind of took some time after graduating, about a year, to kind of like lock in and try to think, well, is this actually a thing that I can do? What kind of fellowships are available? And so I think not being able to study abroad and then really not having those conversations around me kind of made me want to apply. And I really liked what you said about the privilege to dream. A lot of the times I get a little bit stressed, especially being, maybe I'd be stressed at a job or working internationally, but I would just sit down and I would think, well, like I also have the privilege to be struggling right now. Struggling in a different country that maybe my family won't be able to visit. And yeah, I felt I was able to kind of like reassure myself in that way and be like, well, this is a privilege and I should be making the most of, this opportunity and things. I like you said that.
Thank you. And I echo all of that. And I feel like another thing about growing up as like first and low income was that like I or my family never travel, either individual or collectively. We're like we never travel. So when I was a college student, I was telling myself I need to study abroad. It was a need. Well, it wasn't why, it wasn't a need. But anyway, I think I also got lucky that in my own school, like they had like many study abroad programs globally. So logistically and financially, I was able to like transfer my undergrad financially to the program in China. So it worked out like really easily for me. So I was really lucky in that regard. And when I was studying in China, I basically met like fellows from like Princeton Asia Fellowship. And that was when I learned about like these international fellowship in Asia. So I was actually I'm glad I ended up here, but I was actually at that time I was actually considering like Princeton Asia fellowships. And then during the process of like applying to Princeton Asia, I think at this point I really don't remember, but maybe I saw an ad about VIA or something like that. Like I just can't remember. But when I was doing the Princeton Asia fellowship, I learned about VIA. And I was like, oh, these two are basically similar. I might as well apply to both. So I applied to both, and then VIA the post match was Beam Education Foundation, which really matched perfectly with my background in education migration, which were my main focuses as an undergrad. And so I felt super grateful that I was able to do Beam. But but I think the awareness part is such a barrier for first and low income students because you just don't know what you don't know. And echoing what Annie said, like I think talking to people was super helpful. So I would recommend talk to as many people as possible.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. Kind of following up on Lulu, what you just shared, I wanted to ask, Lulu, if you have something to add too, but for Annie and Brianna, how did you decide that VIA would be a good fit and was going to offer the right kinds of support? If you were thinking about other programs or maybe just getting a job or something instead, how did you decide that VIA would be a good fit?
Yeah, I think for me, I thought that the application process was really interesting. We had that group application phase where it was just a discussion, and I had never really been a part of something like that. So I was just kind of interested from the jump that it's kind of seemed like the fellows, have the ability to talk about their experiences and talk about their opinions and things, which maybe in other fellowships that's not as encouraged. And so that was something that kind of stood out to me. And yeah, also just that idea of post matching, I think it was reassuring to see that, Via said, well, you seem like you would be a good fit for Beam. That was reassuring to me to be like, oh, I think that as well, but you guys are sending me over there for an interview. And so I think that was something that was kind of helpful for me in having that kind of support.
Yeah, and I think for me, thinking back, I was really stressed out in the fall of my final year of undergrad about just the ethics of going abroad as someone with a US passport and my positionality and all of that. And so I talked to a lot of folks, and I had a professor who I think really acknowledged my concerns and suggested VIA as an organization that has, I think, done a really good job in prioritizing partnership in its connections with the organizations that it's worked with. And yeah, for me also, like Brianna said, the group interview process, which for mine was focused on, I think, positionality and how we talk about like terminology in international development, like that really stood out to me, because in interviews with other programs, that was not really something that had come up. And via like it just really aligned with my values, and I'm a very value driven, can be a stubborn person, and yeah, for me that was like the selling point.
Thank you for sharing. So I'm going to pause us right here and ask if there are any folks in the room that want to kind of jump into the conversation. If you have any questions, even comments, if you're like, I co-sign that, I feel the same way, you can write that into the chat or you can come off of mute as well. So I'll give you guys a couple moments to add any questions into the chat. You can also use the raise hand function if you would like. Okay. Well, keep thinking, keep marinating, okay? And you can write into the chat at any time. It doesn't need to be at one of these break moments. So we'll move on then to the second section of our session today, which is life during the fellowship, okay? So you've made the decision to apply to both us and, Princeton and Asia. You've done all the interviews, you've gotten your recommendation letters. You're accepted. Congratulations. And now you are on that plane, you're going abroad, you're doing your job, whatever it might be. Okay. So you're in this new space. Let me set my timer again. So, Lulu, I'll start with you this time. And then let me put the question into the chat as well. So, how did your background impact your fellowship experience? And how did you navigate and reflect on your identity during the fellowship?
Yes, that's a great question because that was a question that I thought about during the entire time of my fellowship. As I mentioned earlier, like growing up as an immigrant, I always like thought about like education for like immigrant and other migratory background like communities, and that was what I focused on in undergrad. So I knew like Beam was a perfect fit because Beam is an education nonprofit that supports education access and employment access for migrant students and refugee students from Myanmar. And in Thailand, for me personally, it was very, I think it was like, I guess the word is interesting in terms of like living in Thailand and being in Thailand because like Thailand is such a touristy country where like a big chunk of their economy come from tourism and so many tourists come from China. So when I was living in Thailand, they just see me as like, oh, another tourist from China. So and then being in Thailand as like a bilingual Chinese American, I also felt like many privileges because like there are also like many people in Thailand with like Chinese heritage. So when I was in Thailand being a Chinese American with American passport, I just felt like there were like privileges that I never felt before compared to like my experiences growing up in the US as a struggling immigrant kid. And then connecting that to my work at Beam, I also felt like immense privilege working with like so many like hardworking, inspiring students who have to go through like tremendous structural barriers to access like basic education. So I think for me, like identity was something that I constantly grapple with, but also like discuss with my cohort. And at that time, from like 2019 to 2020, we had like fellows throughout different countries, including like Vietnam, Indonesia, Myanmar, and so on. And I felt like the community of VIA was like super supportive in like discussing these topics. And and so personally, I think for me, being a Chinese American in Thailand and as a teacher was like super unique. And at being, I was also able to like start a brand new initiative. I basically started like a Chinese 101 class for our students, not in the GED program, which was where I and Brianna taught, but in the youth engagement program. And that was like super rewarding to like start like a brand new class where I can like share my language and culture with local communities. And so I think overall positive, but interesting and something I struggle with slash grapple with in terms like identity and privilege and being in a different country. And I'll pass it to actually either of you if you wanted to share.
I could go ahead. Yeah, I think interesting is like a really great word for it, Lulu. I felt it was interesting as well. Um, I really do. One of the main reasons I wanted to work abroad is because I do believe that, cultural immersion and living in a place different from where you're from really does help build up your own self-identity. And that's kind of how I felt. Being abroad, I feel like stronger connections to, my Mexican American identity, also being first gen low income. Annie knows I've talked about it a lot and it kind of just came up in most conversations that I would be a part of because I realize that it is something that's really important. Um, and especially working in Beam, it was really impactful for me because my mom did end up getting her GED when I was a little bit older. So being able to work and connect with students in that way and say, well, I've seen how impactful this was for someone very close to me. And now I'm directly working with students getting their GED as well. That part of my identity, being low income, just being able to, I don't know, add that perspective with my students, I think was really fun.
Yeah, and yeah, Brianna, I can totally relate to that. And I'll just add in, I think just being fully transparent in my first year of my fellowship, I I didn't really know anyone within the cohort at least that was first gen low income, and so sometimes it just I don't know, I had all these thoughts or reflections and they're just like brewing in my mind. And so in my second year, I think like very beginning, Brianna and I first met and I mentioned something offhand like I'm first gen. And then she was like, "Oh my God, me too." And I think that helped me like just be more open about it, especially working in higher education with university students, many of whom are like almost all of whom are first gen high school or the first in their family to pursue university. Like that's something I became a lot more open about in my second year with students, and it's something that I like students and I were able to really connect with and connect over. Um, and like particularly in the spring when I like started receiving acceptances for graduate school, like it was very emotional for like as students to say like, "Oh my gosh, like I'm so proud of you. Like I know you're first gen," because like I started using first gen a lot and they picked up on also terminology of first gen. And then they start asking me about like graduate school and like you're applying for like a master's program or studying education. And so I think it allowed us my identity, like especially being first gen, allowed me to connect with students in I think a really cool, unique way.
Yeah, thank you all so much for sharing. I think a lot of times we focus so much on like, you know, the worries and the constraints that we have, but thinking about the ways that, we can tie our own identities to the work that we're going to be doing. It really highlights that this is, not just like us going abroad to do, service work. Like it is something that's going to help us grow and understand ourselves better as well. So that's really beautiful. Thank you. I also wanted to jump in and ask a kind of a logistical question. I know Brianna prepared something for us, but speaking for myself, I was a low-income student. I was a child of immigrants. There was just so much I never learned about budgeting and financial literacy, which was why, these kinds of opportunities were frankly really scary for me, because I didn't know how to manage my finances. But Brianna, you have shared a lot about your personal journey, educating yourself about financial literacy and budgeting. So yeah, I wanted to give you a little bit of space to talk about how you navigated your experience abroad.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, similar to you, Yuki, I realized kind of early on, into adulthood that there's a lot of things that I didn't know in regards to, financial literacy. If I were to ask my family for any financial advice, it would usually be along the lines of you should always carry cash, you should invest in hard assets like gold, and you should never ever have a credit card ever. It will just put you in debt. Just don't even touch anything like that, right? And that made sense in the context of my family and, their history and their experiences. But as someone who wanted to go live abroad, I realized that there was a lot of work that I needed to do, kind of learning if this is something that was actually feasible and something that I could actually do. So once I knew I would be living abroad for a year, I was really nervous because I knew, of course, that I would be having a salary. I'd be being paid every month. But there was that idea of like, maybe what if I can't actually do this, right? So in a way to like reassure myself, I kind of learned as much as I could about, financial literacy and things. So I made a little bit of a presentation. And this is just how I reassured myself. This is what I did. So not technically advice, um, but just to kind of show that it's kind of something that you can do. Let me see. So I call it hacking credit cards, traveling for free. Because I would always hear about those solo female travelers who were traveling on like credit card points, and I wanted to do that. Like if someone's getting something for free, I wanted it to be me. Let's see. So just to give a little layout of during my VA year, I traveled to all of these countries, and all of the hotel accommodations were free, right? So I didn't pay for any of it, and also some excursions as well. And also, I'm in a hotel right now in Chiang Mai, and I use my credit card points to pay for that, right? So again, this is something that I currently still do. Next. So when I knew that I was going to be living abroad, there were two main things that really stressed me out. One being foreign transaction fees. I would travel to Mexico and I would travel when I was in university and things. And every time I would use my debit card, I would get that 3% fee. And if I'm, gone internationally for about like a week, it doesn't really matter. But being, international for about a year, those kind of things add up. So I didn't want to pay any additional money. I don't like paying for things in general. And then my second goal was how do you use credit card points to get free things, and just to pay for things? Because again, I heard everyone talking about that. So for foreign transaction fees, I found out that there are two ways that you can do it. One is debit accounts that waive those fees. So I actually didn't know about Charles Schwab or the debit account that waived those fees until I was in Thailand, and someone told me about it. So I didn't know that that was an option that I could have taken. So I ended up taking the travel credit card route, and I ended up getting the Chase Sapphire Reserve. And so the reason I got the reserve is because I wanted those welcome points. So there's a 75,000 welcome point bonus, which was about $1,000. So I used all of that for my hotel stays, essentially. So again, I didn't pay anything. That money you can also use to pay yourself back. So again, it would be worth it in that sense as well. If I paid myself back, I basically paid off the annual fee, but I knew I wanted to use it for travel and I knew I wanted to use it for hotel stays specifically. So I had to figure out a way to make the annual fee worth it to me. Again, I don't want to spend money at all. So the card essentially gave a $300 travel credit. Again, anytime you're spending money outside of the US, that's travel credit. So I immediately kind of got that back, which made that annual fee $250. Then I saw that they had global entry and TSA pre-check, which was $100, so they'd reimburse me for that. I haven't used it, but it's a 4-year thing, so technically I have it, and it was, again, free. I wouldn't have bought it otherwise. But again, I want to get all the free things that I could, and that essentially brought it down to $150. Annie, Lulu, I don't know about you guys, but if I'm traveling domestically or internationally, I'm at the airport like 3 hours before for no reason. I'm just sitting there. And so one of the things about the card is that it gave Priority Pass. And Priority Pass, they have buffets, mimosas sometimes, showers. Like I was there sometimes 4 hours in advance because I had that Priority Pass. I was eating full meals and like taking to go as well. So that made it ultimately worth it with honestly the amount of food that I took from the lounges. I think that was probably worth $150. But it also included travel insurance. And for someone who's a little bit sentimental about my things, that was really important to me. And then also $15 a month DoorDash credit. Thailand doesn't have DoorDash, but again, I wanted to get the most money I could out of the card. So every month I was sending my friends $15 worth of coffee because, I'm getting this free money, so why not? And so that's how I kind of justified having this high, annual fee card. And again, then I had no foreign transaction fee, and I basically made money off owning this card for that first year. But again, even knowing all of that, I was really stressed because I'm constantly kind of a little bit financially stressed. Because I was thinking, oh no, like maybe it's worth it this year, but maybe I'm not going to be traveling as much, right? Maybe $550 is too much in the future. But you're allowed to change your mind. And I didn't know this. Someone told me. But you can just call Chase, I guess, whenever you want, and you can downgrade your card if you would like. So I reevaluated and looked through the kind of traveling that I'm going to be doing this year, and I realized that I'm not going to be using all of those benefits. It's not worth it to have that high annual fee. So I downgraded to the Sapphire Preferred, which is $95 annual fee. And I still have that foreign transaction and I still have points that I'm able to use. So again, I kind of just wanted to share this and talk a little bit about it because I really didn't know any of these things existed or using credit cards or being able to make money in this kind of way. And so that was my main kind of debate, living abroad. But these kind of things are put in place and you are able to use them and benefit from them. And so, yeah. And then this is some shameless self-promotion. These are my reference if you guys wanted to. If you wanted to chase Sapphire Preferred, if you're going to be abroad, you can use it. But yeah, I guess I was wondering, Annie, Lulu, like how you guys navigated that as well.
I wasn't that savvy financially. However,
Stress.
but I think when I was like before, like the summer before abroad or the spring, I already thought about like foreign transaction fees. I was like, oh my God, I've been making this salary abroad as a fellow. I can't be paying these foreign transaction fees. So that was like the only thing I researched about, which was like foreign transaction fees. And I learned that like Charles Schwab and Fidelity have like these foreign transaction fees, which would save you a ton of money when you are like when you're living abroad, especially when you're doing international fellowship with a stipend. And yeah, but I didn't know about a credit card, so that's super helpful. Thank you, Brianna. And I think growing as a first-gen low-income student meant that like no one really like taught you these things until you kind of self-teach yourself as an adult. And then when you learn these things, you'll be like, I wish I learned them earlier. So I think that was a super helpful 101, critical 101 slash personal finance 101 from Brianna. Thank you.
Yeah, oh, sorry, Yuki. Oh, I was just going to add, for me, I think going in, I knew that I wanted to save as much as possible. So I had like basically a spreadsheet like that kept track of all my expenses. And I think when you first arrive, it can be pretty easy, just be like, oh my gosh, everything is so cheap, like kind of go crazy. But I think spreadsheets kind of kept me in line, and I think go in, think about like what your priorities are, and just remember that like your fellowship experience doesn't need to look like, it can be unique to you. And so for me, like I always feel a little bit awkward, a little bit insecure, and people are like, "Where did you travel?" And I'm like, I really didn't travel that much. My main goal going in was to learn as much as about Burma, Myanmar, as much as possible. And so like the places I did travel were by bus to border towns. And yeah, like my after my first year, I felt very, I don't know, sometimes just insecure. Like I said, like I'm like I haven't done a ton of traveling, but just yeah, remember that it can be, think about your priorities, what you want to prioritize going in, and it can be unique to you.
I love all of that advice. I think that's really helpful. Like, yeah, all of these fellowships can and should look very different according to your personal priorities. So I'll pause again here. If there are folks who want to share any comments or questions, some good suggestions coming in from Wallace. So you guys should check out the the chat. Is there anybody else who has any suggestions or comments or questions? Oh, Dawn, go for it.
Hi, I'm sorry. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. Um, sorry, I can't turn my camera on. I'm like in between a couple things and I look like a mess. So you don't want to see me anyways, I tell you. But I just wanted to say thank you to Annie, Lulu, and Brianna for, really sharing, vulnerable situations. I too am a first gen, and I feel like so much of what you said about your experiences resonate with me 100%. And Brianna and my family, the only financial advice I got was if your credit card don't pay for it, go to the next credit card. Like if my mother had them like a card deck, and then I remember being like, that can't be right. Like, but that's what she did, right? She'd pay $5 on one, $2 on another, and she'd just keep going down till it was, done. So, and the other thing is that about being a first gen and living experiences that can be very different than other college students is that all of my besties are also first gen. I don't know how we found each other in the world, but we did. And maybe it's because of the commonalities, maybe because of the same vulnerabilities or, imposter syndromes or whatever. But yes, today, if I need support, I've got a whole network of first gens. So I applaud you. I just want to say how awesome I think you all three are.
Totally agree. Y'all are amazing. All right. Any other comments or questions from the group? All right. Well, in the interest of time, I will get us going into section 3. So now we are talking about life after the fellowship, which you are all in now as alumni. And so I have 3 kind of questions for you, which I'll throw into the chat. So, how did your experience and your identity as a first gen low income person impact your next steps after the fellowship? Did you notice any changes in yourself or your community as a result of your participation? And then lastly, how did you feel, when you were returning to your home country, or in Brianna's case, if you're staying out in Asia for longer doing other things? And I think, Annie, I'll start with you this time.
So I would say being first gen, low income, made me a lot more like anxious about what would happen post fellowship. Like this sounds crazy, but even like before the fellowship started, like I'm just someone who like gets very worried about the future. And so like by the time my first year had my fellowship had come to an end, I like I wish I'd been more like present. But I was instead kind of very anxious, like asking people like, about grad school because I knew I wanted to go to grad school and I've been wanting to study international ed. So I think, yeah, in some ways it made me more anxious and just like worried about like feeling like I needed to have it figured out, probably earlier than necessary. Um, and then in terms of like changes that I think throughout the past, I came back to the US in mid July. I think I find myself a lot more confident and more comfortable with uncertainty. Um, just living somewhere completely new for 2 years. And then also, I'm the oldest of four girls. And so my hope is that my joining, being a fellow, working, living abroad, will help my sisters feel more confident about pursuing something similar or even just study abroad, which felt like very, very scary, like impossible for me in undergrad. Um, and I would also say, yeah, like I won't lie, I think the transition back has been quite difficult. It hasn't been easy. Um, but I think, like I said, I feel a lot more confident, confident about who I am, what it is that I want. And that has helped me find ways to kind of ease some of the pains of I guess coming back to the US and just change and starting with a new chapter. And um, yeah, so so I guess some of those ways, like feeling more confident to pursue opportunities, um, like I'm studying Burmese right now, and so like just things like that, things that I would have I think without this experience I would have been more like nervous because I'm like I'm not good enough or I'm not like I don't know enough. But now I feel like more sure in my capabilities.
Yeah, I think I have a similar experience. Like, I do feel much more sure in just like my ability to, work abroad and live abroad. And me specifically, I did choose to stay in Thailand, and that's where I am now. I'm in between, looking for employment in Thailand. And I don't think that I would have felt so comfortable kind of jumping out and doing something like that if I didn't have the work experience that I had at Beam. I had a lot of responsibilities, and it was really nice to feel like, oh, like I am good at doing this. And I fit this role really well. So kind of becoming more secure in myself professionally, but then also through VIA as well, like living abroad, working abroad and things. Um, I couldn't imagine before just kind of being in Thailand on, a tourist visa and looking for a job. Like that wouldn't have seemed like feasible. Um, but yeah, it's what I'm able to do now. And I think that my time at VIA really kind of helped me feel more secure.
And I think even before the fellowship during undergrad, I always knew that I wanted to go to some sort of a grad school, especially like PhD, because I feel like being first and low income growing up, then entering college, I was like, what's the highest degree I could possibly get? And at that time, I was like, oh, PhD is free. I want to consider that. And then after working and so on, I realized it's not for me. So I decided to go for a master's. And that for me was like existential crisis because I realized something that I had that I was working really hard towards, and something I thought I had really, really wanted was not what I really wanted anymore. So that was hard for my like early 20s, but everything will be okay. I think same thing with like post fellowship, like everything will be okay regardless of whether or not you want to stay in Asia, whether you want to return to your home country, like things will be okay, I learned. So I think echoing what folks have shared, I think the the confidence piece was super important because now, like sometimes, even nowadays, I still think about like, I used to live abroad alone for 2 years. I think I can do this too. So I think the experience for me is really like positive, empowering on the individual level for me personally.
Also, just wanted to like mention, um, I do want to have more like working experience, but I do want to go to graduate school. And so hopefully Lulu and Annie, maybe at some point we can have more of conversations on that because I'm still in the boat of I don't necessarily understand funding for graduate school. Like that is something that I still have a lot of questions about, which is why I want more work experience and I want kind of to, do a lot more things before I commit to that kind of thing. But it's kind of in the same kind of breath of I didn't know anything about international fellowships or studying abroad or working abroad or doing anything like that. And having these conversations are really important. And then hopefully we can have the conversation a little bit later because I do want to go to grad school in the future. And it's so nice to see two people a little bit similar to me who have done it and are doing it now. Annie, congrats.
Oh yeah, I see in the chat, Dong asks, is the program 1 year, 2 year? So in my experience, it was super ironic because basically in my cohort in 2019, half of us decided to extend that for the second year in the mid-year conference in Indonesia in February 2020. I remember that exactly. It was like February 2020. We're in Indonesia, and half of us were like, we love this program. We love to extend it for a second year. And then a month later, COVID happened. So I was actually planning to stay at Beam in Thailand for like 2 years and then COVID happened. So I hope another pandemic wouldn't happen to any of you. But yeah, that was a story in February 2020 Indonesia when we were celebrating.
That's crazy. That's so sad. I didn't know that either. I'm learning all of this GCF lore on this call. I love it. Dawn also had a couple other questions about, people coming to stay with you. So, Brianna, Annie, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. Lulu was busy responding via chat, but if there's anything that you two want to add, or if there are any folks who want to ask more questions too.
Yeah, I really liked when people visited me because I would buy their flights on my credit card and then they would sell me, so I got a lot of points for that. So I was inviting everyone over. But yeah, the thing with VIA is you get to find your own accommodation and housing. So I was able to find a condo in my budget, and it had a futon. So my brother got a passport and he made his first steps out of the United States, and he visited me in Thailand, and he stayed on my futon, so it was really nice.
I love it. All right. Well, we are coming close to the end, friends. Let me end this timer. So yeah, I'd love to kind of get to hear from each of you if you have any kind of closing remarks for our audience. Oh, and I didn't pick an order, so any of you can start. So.
I think there's a question in the chat.
Oh, there's a question in the chat. Oh, Sam, do you want to come off mute?
Yeah,
That's a
sorry.
great question.
Do we still have enough time? If not, we can bump this up for
Give us the
later.
short version of your question. I would
Yeah,
love
sure. So basically, just want to say thank you so much for everyone for sharing your very inspirational story. But I was kind of curious to hear your thoughts. So I'm also a first gen child of immigrants, and my international experience post grad include teaching English in Asia and also creating educational programs for students over there. And honestly, it was very fulfilling chapter of my life. But this life decision was honestly like super confusing for my parents because they invested so much of their lives, so much of their time, so much of their money immigrating from Asia to the US to make sure that me and my sister could have like a better life and more opportunities in the United States. And they were so curious and so just wondering why would I want to spend my own life to go back to Asia where they're from. So I was like wondering if you had to kind of navigate this type of conversation with your own family. Thank
Me.
you. Okay. Thank you.
That was exactly, I totally resonate with that. That was exactly what my mom said. Like, we work so hard to leave there, and now you want to go back. So I think it was extremely, like, I think it was extremely shocking at so many levels for these, at least for my immigrant parents, and they were extremely shocked. And I think another part, this is like personal because, like, I think for me growing up first gen low income, and my parents can't speak English, meant that I had to like navigate like my entire educational journey, my career journey all by myself. So I never really like discuss things with them. And growing up, the mindset from my parents were like, oh, we cannot help you with anything. Good luck to you. If you make it, great. If you don't make it, that's great too. And so, in my personal case, I never discussed it with them. And I told my mom on the day of my graduation that I'm moving to Thailand. And she was so shocked. I think that was, I think looking back, I would have done it differently. But I do resonate with what Sam shared, how like I think it is just tough for them to understand slash relay and empathize. And honestly, I think I don't have good advice, but I think hopefully eventually they will understand. I think I especially connected the thing about like me doing education work, making like impact and like education in the US and back in Asia to like my basically my life career and education. And they still slowly started to understand slash accept. I guess they accepted the reality. But yeah, personally, I think I didn't do a good job because I told them on the day of my graduation. So I hope other people, I don't know, might have better advice.
I love that story so much. In the interest of time, I'm going to ask Sanlin Tun if you want to share your question, because that was the same as my question as well, like a word of advice. Um, maybe I'll just pass it back to the speakers. Can the three of you share a little word of advice?
Oh, I think I want to share one last thing. I think being a first chef is that the reminder, I think I want to back then I reminded myself like being a first gen man, you're the first, but also the last to be first gen. So you should have all the confidence in yourself that you are the change and be the change that you want to see, and most importantly, follow your heart because you're the first but also last gen of this first gen label. So believe in yourself.
I think for me as well, like maybe you haven't seen yourself represented in some of these spaces, but the experiences that you have are really impactful and meaningful, and they're really going to add and impact the work that you're doing. And then also, I guess, just to kind of be comfortable being more open with the fact that it is a benefit to the organizations you're working for, and it's a benefit for yourself, these experiences. And that's something that I try to do as well, a little bit more, just talk about these kind of things, because you never know, what kind of support you might get.
Yeah, and I think just going very much on the same theme, just remember that like your first gen low income identities and those experiences, they're really assets, not deficits, that help you be more oftentimes be able to connect with the communities you're working with more. And so that's something, these experiences, this identity, like be proud of that. Like, and I wish I that's something I wish I could have told myself like way earlier.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you to everybody for joining us today. I really hope that this sparks more conversations, right? That we can kind of extend the roundtable, add more chairs, things like that. And of course, thank you to Lulu and Annie and Brianna for sharing your experiences with us today. Kazuto, did you have something you wanted to share?
Oh, no, I just wanted to, well, first say hi to all three of you and then thank you for really sharing very personal stories. I think it was very, very valuable to kind of, for the audience to hear kind of the process from applying to going through the fellowship and post-fellowship. Over the 60 some years of VIA, I think what I appreciate meeting all the people from different generations, I think there is something common for the people who are drawn to VIA. I think the value piece that Annie mentioned. But I think especially the recent team who is supporting the Global Community Fellowship, Yuki, Melissa, and others, have been very intentional in how we invite people to the fellowship. And a couple of you mentioned like the application process to it is unique. I think I haven't really heard of that process with other groups, but I think that does kind of draw people, the right kind of people, I guess, that for the fellowship, and also the way we select our partners on the Asia side too. I think that's something that we're very proud of, and I think we're all kind of connected through those values. So just really appreciate some of the comments that you mentioned. I appreciate Brianna's very practical advice around finances. That's of course important at many stages of our lives, but especially when you're first get low income, and also kind of from high school to college, and thinking beyond that. I think it is very useful. So I just wanted to thank you for all of the, your stories. Please do stay connected. I look forward to connecting with you again personally sometime soon.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, Kazuto. So as a closing, I'm just gonna add a little note in the chat. All of our speakers today have generously offered to share their email contact information, so you can take that down. If you have any more questions that come up for you, please feel free to reach out to them or to me. My email is there as well. And if you want to learn more about VIA and the GCF program in particular, I've added links to our website and our social media. So again, thank you all so much for joining us and asking really great questions and being part of the discussion.